the train going. This is Antonio from Illinois. Antonio wants to know what atheists believe is the basis for morality, and Antonio is calling in as a theist. Antonio, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, man? I'm wondering if this topic is way too broad with the time we got left, and I don't want to like push it like too deep.
I'm so sorry that we had to get you at the very end of the show, but I mean, we can go as deep as we can for the time's sake. And be sure to call again next week too if you feel like we didn't cover it enough.
Yeah, you mean we can't cover the entire basis of morality in the next 10 to 15 minutes?
if anybody can do it, Shannon, it's you and me. Let's do it. Come on. Let's hear it, Antonio. Tell me what you want to say.
Yeah, and by the way, I got to give a quick shout out to Shannon. She might not remember me too much, but I actually had a conversation with her some months back.
We had an abortion conversation together, Antonio.
Gosh, if I had a nickel.
Absolutely. Hi.
Oh, that's awesome.
Of course I remember you. I was actually wondering if it was you. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to talk to you again. You were always lovely to talk to. Nice to see you again.
All right. It's good to talk to you too. So I'll try to keep this short as possible. So, firstly, I'll just give my perspective, and then I want to hear you guys' perspective. So, in Christianity, when we talk about like what grounds truth, we just look at Jesus by saying, by referencing John 14:6, which says he is the way, the truth, and the life. That's what he claims. And when we look at things like love, for example, 1 John 4:8 says that God is love. And when we look at things like wisdom and knowledge, we look at Colossians 2:2-3, which says all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden in Christ. And when we look for why we should reason, we look at Isaiah 1:18 that says, "Come, let us reason together," said the Lord. So, I'm looking at a couple of things. We see reason, we see knowledge and wisdom. We can ground all these things in God. This the Christian worldview. So, in atheism, how would such things like this be grounded?
How our wisdom? So go ahead, Dan.
I think, so it's a common question that comes up, and I think it's an interesting one to talk about. It was actually one of the big questions I had on my mind for a long time when I was really kind of considering these ideas very deeply. I didn't understand how an atheist could, like, quote unquote, base his morality on anything, because I had always come with the understanding of, you have to have some sort of ethical system to base things on it. And when I was a Christian, mine was Christianity, at least my interpretation of Christianity. So I would say, atheists do it in different ways. Not all atheists are going to do it the same way. For myself, I am inspired by the ideas of secular humanism, of several variations. Specifically, the most recent variation of the Humanist Manifesto outlines some principles that I think that I would agree with, and I think that would be best if most people followed these principles. And that's kind of how I am understanding how morality would work, is if everybody kind of followed these principles, or if most people kind of follow these principles, would we live in a quote unquote better world? And I know, and I am skipping over lots and lots of philosophical details we could really sink our teeth into. But essentially there's no real one way to answer this, and it's going to be based on, depending on who you talk to. There's an argument that could be made that says that our morality does have some basis in evolution, and that evolution can sometimes support altruistic actions, and sometimes it doesn't support altruistic actions, which is why we see the conflicts that we do in modern society. And that's kind of naturalist understanding of morality, I think, definitely has a place in the conversation as well. I think as people, we kind of decide as a society of what's best, and we kind of just go from there, for better or worse. So there's obviously going to be conflicts, and I think there's going to continue to be conflicts until, we're all dead because of those conflicts, or something else. Maybe we'll all reach utopia, who knows? But I definitely don't have this idea, and we kind of talked about this earlier, of this one idea to rule them all that's going to always trump all ideas in all situations. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm a fan of the idea of a morality that is changing over time, that is continuing to develop. If I'm the person that's saying, look, this is my ideas, and we need to stick with these ideas for now, for all time, that's going to cause some problems later on when we discover new things about ourselves, whether it be through science or through social changes and technological changes. I think we need to be savvy and adapt to those changes when we can. Shannon, did you have anything you want to say on this?
Yeah, I could say a couple of things. I think you summarized that really well. But what I could do, I think that which might be valuable, is go through some of the process that I went through during deconversion, because morality was actually the most contentious issue for me. And it was because I came to the realization that my perceptions of morality differed, and I had to either augment them in order to match the Bible or find ways to reconcile them with the Bible. And that brought me to this conclusion that I'm still working on, which is one of the reasons why the morality conversation is so interesting to me. So I'm going to preface this by saying I don't have the answer to that question, but it's one of the questions that I'm the most interested in answering. So what I came to is that I was subjectively interpreting a book based on ideas that I developed internally. The book itself was written by people who were also putting down their own internal ideas. And there was an inconsistency between the two. Because I had attributed that book to God, I was working on reconciling those inconsistencies, and I found that it was incompatible. Even if I hadn't found that it was incompatible, I came to the realization that I was the one doing the reconciliations. That was me. I was doing the reconciliations. I was the one making the assessments. If I was the one making the assessments, then that means that I must have some sort of internalized frame of morality that belongs to me, that's based on things that I perceive in society and how I instantiate that in the world. If I was attempting to reconcile morality with the Bible and finding it difficult, that means that I already had morality in me and would have had no one ever shown me the Bible. So I didn't need the grounding, and it didn't come from there. If it came from there, I wouldn't have had the problem. So that was one of the big deconversion pins. That was a pin in the grenade of deconversion for me. That was a big one. That question still hasn't been successfully answered for me by anybody, aside from an assertion that, well, God equals morality. Therefore, there's an objective morality that we must all strive towards. That doesn't explain where my internalized conception of morality came from, or where anybody's does, why any of them differ, and why they vary over time.
Yeah, sure. Well, I get why that probably wouldn't satisfy your personal. I guess your personal. Whatever you're looking for to satisfy your personal craving, or if you will, is that the wrong word to use for your personal
conceptualization of morality, internalized conceptualization of morality? Yeah, you would have one too. We all do. Mm-hmm. You see it clearly in the Bible, and then either attribute it to the Bible. Let's say, so Antonio, when you look at the Bible, do you say this is where my morality comes from? If somebody took this away from me, or I'd never seen it, I wouldn't have any conceptualization of morality.
Sure. Yeah.
So you think if you had never seen the Bible, you would not have any concept of morality?
Well, according to the Christian worldview, the reason why
I'm asking you what you think.
His creation has morality is because he instilled it into us as a reflection of his character. So I wouldn't have apprehended it was God. Clearly, I wouldn't have I may have not conceptualized it.
You may have not given it the attribution of God, but God gave it to you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I see where you're going there. You're saying you may not have given it the attribution of God if you didn't know God exists or no one had ever shown you a Bible. But based on your belief system as it exists now, you believe that it was given to you. It was dawned upon you by God. So God kind of injected you with a conceptualization of morality. And that's the reason that it exists inside of you. So if that's the reason that it exists inside of you, why are there inconsistencies? Why is it not uniform amongst all people in all situations and all scenarios throughout time?
Well, the answer to that is in Christianity is that we live in a fallen world. People employ their own. So people employ. Yeah.
So they rile against it. Then, so you believe that they know it, but choose to act differently.
Well, yeah, it says in Romans, somewhere in Romans 1:18, roughly. I can't remember the exact verse off the top of my head, but it talks about how they suppress the truth and unrighteousness, and that would explain, why people go after their own truths, why people,
Romans 1:20,
want to look for their own explanations for life, and it's just people are in rebellion against God. So Christianity has the answer for why there's so many different worldviews.
You have to attribute a lot to other people's minds that you don't know in order for that to make sense. You have to give attribution to people. You have to say, not only do I know where morality comes from, but I know the reason you are acting in deference to my conceptualization of morality. I not only know where morality came from for everybody, I know the reason that everybody else acts differently. I, Antonio, know the minds of everyone else on earth who acts inconsistently from me. That's a lot of knowledge.
I do, but I wouldn't say that I do, but the
you
Bible
just attested
quite clearly who does.
Because the Bible said.
Yeah.
The Bible said that everybody else has to be lying.
Look, I'm not looking to anybody's motives, and I would say there's a particular level in my fleshly existence which I would say I really don't want to believe people are lying or people are being dishonest or anything like that. I admit that's a shortcoming I have as a Christian in my flesh, but at the end of the day, I know what's quite clear in the scriptures. I know what God says. So if I'm going to be a consistent Christian and hold to a standard, again, all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge are hidden in Him. If I'm going to hold to that standard consistently, I got to see from what He says, not my own personal wants and feelings. You see what I mean?
Mm.
Sure. Yeah. But you're allowing yourself to have a lens to view the intentions, knowledge, understanding, motivations of others that is jaded and skewed. Because if even one other person does not have that same conceptualization anywhere in the world, if there's one person who wasn't innately imbued with that knowledge and is making the active decision in their life to act against it, even though there's cultural variations, and if that happened anywhere even once throughout time, then it's a direct contradiction. It's a direct contradiction.
Well, I mean,
the only way that you can reconcile that is to assert attributes of other people and to assume the contents of their mind, their character, and the reason that they make decisions.
Well, yeah, sure. Outside the Christian worldview, you can ask that question externally. As a Christian,
valid question.
Again, I wouldn't. What's that?
I think it's a fair question or a fair statement.
I'm not saying it's an unfair question. I'm just saying that we can't ask that, within the same worldview. All I would say is that, like in my everyday experience, when I'm talking to non-believers, I have a desire to want to apprehend why they reject God. I have a desire to see it, that it's really just maybe that they simply don't know. Maybe they just had came across a really bad experience. I really want to cling to that. I'm not going to see. That's my own human experience.
Can I ask? I'd like to ask a question.
The Bible says we already know.
Here's what I would like to know. If the Bible didn't actually say that, Antonio, if that verse about people rejecting God wasn't in the Bible, would anything in your observations, in your experiences with people, would lead you to conclude that everybody on earth was rejecting God?
That's a good question.
If the Bible did not specifically reveal that?
If it didn't say that, would there be any observations in your own personal accord that would lead you to that conclusion?
Well, in my worldview, that's not a possibility. That's a hypothetical, so I can't even entertain that.
But there was a time and place where you didn't actually know that verse existed, right? Would be possible to conclude. Well,
there's a certain a psychological maturity that you don't have when you're a kid, clearly. There's certain things that you don't know why you don't know. Like, for instance, like, you know that you can eat, you know how to eat, but you don't know how you know it. So you have a psychological maturity as you mature and get older and things like this, acquire knowledge, so on and so forth.
But I'm wondering because if we're letting the Bible tell us like facts about the world, like facts that we could, observe and examine, and if there were things that were there or weren't there, then it's kind of controlling our view of reality in a sense. And I'm wanting to know if the Bible's view of reality, because it is a model of reality that disagrees with other models of reality, if I want to know if the Bible's model of reality is accurate and is true, how can I verify that if it doesn't match with my observations and my experiences?
Well, it depends on what your scope of verification is. Is your scope of verification your sensory experience? Is your scope of verification something other than yourself? It just depends on what that verification would be.
I mean, is the Bible required for my verification?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Is the Bible, do I have to have knowledge of the Bible to verify things about reality like that? For example, like that people are rejecting God. Do I have to know about the Bible in order for me to conclude that?
Well, the Bible makes it very clear that we're born sinners. So when we reject him, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, we're still rejecting his revelation in some way. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say you would have to have.
You know this from the Bible, right? Like, I know that you know this from the Bible, but I'm asking if your experiences are telling you this, if anything from the outside world has ever told you this.
Well, when we talk about experience, I mean, because experience can be defined in a number of different concepts. It can be, my experience in talking to you guys right now. It could be like reading the Bible. I mean, I would have to. Are you saying if I have a different kind of experience? You mean?
Yeah, like I'll give you an example. Like black holes can kind of absorb light, and light is affected by the gravitational pull of black holes. I could live my whole life and not know that to be true, even if it is true, which I think it is true. I think there's evidence for that, but that could still be true, and I would have never known because I never found a way to verify that or even think about that. I'd have to read the research of other people in order to know that's true and look at what they've said is true. I'm saying as a fact, the fact that people reject God, like as a fact, if you didn't have the Bible, if that was not a thing in your life that you could look at and examine, would any of your experiences confirm to you in your worldview that people were rejecting God?
Well, I would have to look at the creator-creation distinction there because, like, you looked at black holes as an analogous point. The thing about black holes is that they are a contingent element, So it's possible to not know about things that are contingent in our experience. But when we talk about which is the ground of all being, God in the Christian framework would be the ground of all being. So it's not possible to not know or to not experience God on some level.
Not possible. How do you know that?
Well, because there's two instances of revelation that we can account for in the Christian worldview. First is natural revelation. We just look at the world around us, the sun, the stars, the planet, stuff like that. And then there's also the spiritual revelation. We've already discussed that.
Okay.
Just look at the Holy Scriptures from Genesis to Revelation.
Okay, let me ask you this. What about your natural revelations came to that conclusion? Like what part of your natural revelations gave that conclusion?
Well, from an evidentialist framework, people would say, they'll do something like the cosmological argument, for instance, like whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe begins to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. I think outside the Christian biblical framework, at best that can only lead you to like deism. But in my experience, when we ground that in a presuppositional framework, it makes sense that if things begin to exist, they will have to ultimately come from an unconditionally non-created eternal cause.
Okay. I think we got a little bit off topic from what we were talking about.
Did we just parlay into a kalam?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm getting at is, as a Christian, when I look at the world around me,
okay, but
I see that.
This is a really good question. Do I have to be a Christian to come to the same conclusions that you do?
Well, on a particular semantic level, no, but on a metaphysical level, you do.
Because I have like God kind of influences me, or is like doing things, and I have experiences of God. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, when they say
you already know he exists.
When they say like the same conclusion, they mean like 1 + 1 = 2, that we just have the same answer, or they mean the same conclusion as in or just we both are operating from the same metaphysical framework.
I don't even think that. I just think observations. I think you can make the same observations as me, and we don't have to have the same metaphysical framework at all. Like, I think you can observe me dropping my phone here, and we don't have to have the same metaphysical framework at all, I think you can still make that observation.
Well, yeah. Like it's like for me, if I this mailman delivers something to me, and then I tell him, that's a wonderful blue sky up there. That's just a fantastic day, and he says, "Yeah, I agree with you." I'm not going to have a metaphysical conversation with him right there. I mean, because that's not the time and place. We could both observe the sky. We'll just say that in the Christian framework, the reason why he can is because he lives in God's world. But metaphysically, we don't have a grounding for that. Although I'm not saying he can't observe the sky, see it's up there. I'm just saying that he rejects the foundation for why he can.
Okay, even if he rejects the foundation, though, you can still make the observation, right? Like, you agree with me on that?
Well, only because he lives in God's world, but he doesn't give that revelation and honor and glory back to God in which he does.
Okay, but why can't he do that, though? Why is he allowed to make that observation and still reject God's world? Because it seems to me that if it really is required that that this foundation has to be true, then it seems to me that he couldn't make that observation at all without confirming that in some level. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Well, independent of God, none of us can even so much as bat our eyelash, twitch our finger, even speak now. God upholds all things by the power of his will. So outside of that framework, he cannot do it. But the reason why people do these things is because God is merciful and he allows them to do these things.
I hear a lot of interpretations of why this is happening and why it's, but I don't know the how. I'm not sure how you know that. I'll give you an example of this. You say that I'm rejecting God right now. I have a call-in show. If God really wanted to talk to me, I have an open line that's open every Friday at 7. I have yet to receive a call from God, at least the Christian conception of God. I think that's the example where I can show where God isn't contacting me unless he's been somehow picking up the lines and I've been talking to him. But at that point, obviously I'm not aware of it because I don't have any memory in my experience. So I'm not sure, if you see what I'm getting at here, there's common observations that you and I can have about the world. I'm not observing that people are rejecting God. Shannon and I don't come to that conclusion. And we're wondering, how are you coming to this conclusion and is it justified? Because I think from Shannon and I's perspective, you would not have came to that conclusion unless the Bible gave you that conclusion first.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, when we're talking about ultimate frameworks from which we reason, the only way something can be, if we're talking about an ultimate framework, an ultimate concept of being for everything in a Christian worldview, which is God, the only way you could talk about the justification for that, for the ultimate justifier, is by the ultimate justifier. He is the self-attesting ultimate justifier for everything. How would you verify the ultimate authority without it? It would be an incoherent notion, because if there was something outside of him to justify it, then that would be the ultimate authority.
Yeah, I don't know if there is an ultimate authority in that sense. And if there is, I'm not sure how people could access that. I think we can have, like we were talking about earlier, beliefs that could be more or less justified that have, better reasons than others. I don't think that means that we can have the best reasons necessarily and know with 100% confidence that something is true. But I don't know. I'm not sure if having an ultimate authority in that sense is necessary for the kind of knowledge of observations that we're talking about here.
I don't even think it's
Well, I don't want to take up too much time. I know you guys got to get to your next caller.
I appreciate that, Antonio.
Interesting.
It was a great conversation.
I am Objectively Dan. This is Truth Wanted.
He's not important. He's not important, Antonio.
I hope we could talk about this sometime, and I was happy to talk with you again too, Shannon.
This is an interesting conversation, and you've been very polite about this, and I've enjoyed this. Cy 10 Bruggen, Kate and I talked on Twitter one time, and he said he might be wanting to come on Truth Wanted. I only mentioned him because if we're talking about presuppositionalism, I haven't had...
He's much better at this than me, for sure.
Well, I haven't had... I don't know if we've really talked about presuppositionalist stuff as much as we could on Truth Wanted, but I think it's something we could delve into a bit more later. But yeah, thanks for calling. This was kind of fun. I don't know if either of us made. I feel like Shannon wants to say a little bit more.
Oh, if
before
I
we
say
go.
anything, it'll last another like hour and a half. I was going to
No.
delve more into, how I'm all about internalized processes, and my
Oh.
questions were going to revolve around, how does a believer and a non-believer discern if both of us are aware of God's existence? Because the Bible says, "I am aware and you are aware."
I didn't even intend the call to go on.
No.
I didn't even intend the call
No,
to
it's
go on.
a fascinating
no.
conversation. That's
It's
a
a
sign
great
of a good
conversation.
conversation.
This is
There's
good.
no need to apologize.
You don't need to apologize at all. This has been a fantastic convo, but I think it's about time for us to wrap this up. But thanks again, Antonio. Maybe next time when Shannon Q comes on, because Shannon, you're going to come back, right?
Okay,
Maybe we
once
can talk
soccer's
about this.
done, as soon as soccer's done. Stop
Okay.
having them on Fridays and I can come back.
Okay, Shannon, we'll just